Assalamu alaikum YouTube. Hi Tony, it's Imran here. Just continuing to reply to some of the things that you've said in your video. This is quite a sensitive topic. I want to talk about the marriage of the Prophet peace be upon him to Aisha. May God be pleased with her. What I'd like to talk about here is basically some of the accusations that people make, and the fact that how these accusations are unfounded. Now, what I would like to do is initially to start off by saying that the first time these accusations started to appear against the Prophet peace be upon him is within the last 100 or 150 years. Before that time, there was not a person who had actually looked at the life of the Prophet peace be upon him, commented on it, and actually mentioned anything unusual about this marriage at all. Whether these were people who were Muslims, whether these were people who were not Muslims, whether these are people who were pro-Islam, or whether these people were hostile to Islam, they did not mention anything unusual about this. And the reason for this is that culturally this was not unusual, and this was actually accepted as a culture at the time. Now, I'm actually going to step away from religion and just talk about this matter from a non-religious point of view. Now, the passage of a woman from girlhood to womanhood is, in secular countries, determined by an arbitrary age. That means it's a number that we make up. In this country, which is the UK, that age is 16. In the United States, that age is generally 18. If you went to Iowa, for example, in the United States, if you have parental consent, that age can be 14. And depending on where you are in the world, the age can vary quite considerably, from 12 in some countries such as Argentina, Japan, Paraguay, to 18 in such as the United States. So it's basically a number that we make up. Now, what this actually means is, if you think about it, that if I were married to someone who was 17 years old and we were consummating our marriage here in the UK, we would actually be fine. Legal, everything's okay. If we went to the United States and we consummated our marriage there, under the laws in that country, I would be committing statutory rape. So this shows you the problems that we have in deciding when a girl becomes a woman. And if we have these problems now, i.e. the world is unable to decide when a girl is no longer a girl and is now a woman, then what about in times gone by? What about in the time of, say, the biblical prophets of the Old Testament? What about in the time of Abraham? What about in the time of Moses, peace be upon them both? What about in places where there are virtually no laws as we understand them? Tribal areas of the Amazon, tribal areas of Africa. What are these people using as a determinant for the passage of a girl through girlhood to womanhood? It's actually very simple. The criteria that people have used in the past has always been puberty, because that is the change from girl to womanhood, where the girl who is now a woman because she can conceive and give birth to children. She can now become a mother. And really we need to look at when this age can occur. And there's a huge range. The range can be from 8 years old up to 13 years old, and actually can be even older in some cases, because the biggest factor in determining when puberty starts isn't actually just, it's not one, first of all, there's many, but one of the biggest ones is actually climate. If you live close to the equator, i.e. in a hot country, you're more likely to start your period earlier than if you live in a cold country. So if you came to sort of Norway and Scandinavia, etc., in Northern Europe, sort of above that, the women tend to start their periods very, very late, in their mid-teens, late teens. Whereas if you came to somewhere very hot like Africa or Arabia, the onset of puberty is much earlier in girls. Now, I don't know how much actually, if you read the actual narrations of the Prophet peace be upon him and how the marriage was set up and how it was consummated, what you'll find is that the Prophet peace be upon him, he married Aisha, may God be pleased with her, when she was 6 years old, and she was they had the ceremony and she was sent back to her house. with her parents. Now, when she became of age, she was sent back to the Prophet, peace be upon him. That was 3 years later. 3 years later, when she was 9, she had passed her puberty and then was now eligible for marriage as they understood it, and they sent Aisha, may God be pleased with her, to her husband's house, the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the marriage was consummated. Now, the key thing there is the wait, the 3 years wait. A lot of the charges that people make against the Prophet, peace be upon him, can be just simply thrown aside just by showing that actually the Prophet, peace be upon him, waited 3 years until she was eligible for marriage. And none of the people at the time had any qualms with that. In fact, the people who were the parents of Aisha, may God be pleased with her, were very happy to see this happen, and they were happy that their daughter was marrying the Prophet, peace be upon him. Now, I don't know what else you know or not about the marriages of the Prophet, peace be upon him, but the first person that the Prophet, peace be upon him, married was called Khadija, may God be pleased with her. And she was actually 25 years older than the Prophet, peace be upon him. And Prophet, peace be upon him, was married to her throughout the life of Khadija, may God be pleased with her. So until she died, the Prophet, peace be upon him, had never married another person. The only virgin the Prophet, peace be upon him, married was Aisha, may God be pleased with her. And after that, the marriages the Prophet, peace be upon him, had were with widows, not with any other virgins at all. Now, what happened to this Aisha, may God be pleased with her? Well, I think really that's a key question. Let's look at what happened to this young woman, and what did she grow up to do and be. Now, she actually grew up to be a phenomenal scholar of Islam, a phenomenal propagator of Islam, a huge teacher where people would come from miles around to learn from. Muslims get maybe 1/2 to 2/3 of their religion from this great woman. And she was even known to correct Muslim scholars when they made errors, Muslim rulers when they made errors. So all the things that are said about this relationship don't hold at all when you look at the fruits of the relationship. Now, nearing the end of his death, the Prophet, peace be upon him, actually requested from his wife to be allowed to die in the house of Aisha, may God be pleased with her, and he actually died with his head in her lap, and actually that's where he was buried. And if you look at the stories around how they were with each other, and the sort of fun they used to have, the love is so clear and so evident, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, is way above the scandalous charges that people put against him. The problem is that we're confusing not only our culture with the culture of the time, which we can't do. We can't make our culture and the criteria of our culture apply to times gone by, because times and thinking and acceptability of things have changed. This sort of thing is no longer acceptable now, simply because the cultural situation around the world has changed. I mean, the example would be nowadays, I know people who are in their mid-30s who still think they're too young to settle down. I mean, it's gone completely the other way now. People are waiting until until even women are no longer in the stage where they're at the best stages of fertility, they're deciding to settle down and get married, and that's a problem. And also, we have in the United Kingdom here, we have the highest rates of teenage pregnancy. 1 in every 1,000 13-year-olds in this country essentially becomes pregnant. So we can see that culture has a big problem to play, and the fact that we've set our ages of consent at such an arbitrary level, showing the fact that so many people under that level are actually becoming pregnant, etc., because they're more than ready for motherhood many years before this age comes along. All I would say is, don't confuse the cultures, and don't confuse absolute biological God-made timings of human development with arbitrary man-made laws. If we don't do that, then we realise actually that the Prophet, peace be upon him, is not guilty of anything at all that was considered improper, and we can actually get down to looking at what the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, as opposed to finding reasons not to look at what he said by pointing fingers at what we assume that he has done. This is quite a sensitive topic, and I appreciate that, and I hope I've actually done it justice, because it's hard to talk on this topic without people making assumptions. Anyway, that's just some of my comments. Assalamu alaikum, YouTube.